What's up, y'all? Welcome to episode 4 of Contemplations with Austin West. Man, I'm just realizing in this moment how I just came on here. Yeah, I've had a wild morning. Typically, I've been recording these episodes right when first thing, I get out of bed to do my prayers, do my meditations, and then I take a minute to settle in. I make my coffee and I come up here and record. And did not have the opportunity today. I had to take my car into the shop. I ran some errands, Cosmo on a walk. I ate some breakfast, and then I literally came straight upstairs. So I'm here. I'm sweating after this walk outside, noticing that I didn't really presence myself. So I'm going to do that with you right now and just slow myself down a little bit into this call. Maybe that's an invitation, an opportunity for you in doing whatever you are doing right now. To also just take a minute to slow down as we go into our 4th episode of Contemplations. And as always, this Contemplation podcast is brought to you by Entheos Holistics and the Colosseum, my microdosing and men's work mission and purpose in this life. And yeah, I've been going through this thing lately where noticing the frustration I have towards social media and algorithms and just not wanting to play the fucking game, man. I'm so sick of the game, and I'm sure I'll do a whole different contemplation on social media in general. But there's so much of what I see out there of going on where it's all of this, you need to, you should be, money, money, money. It's exhausting. And noticing that those type of messages, at least on my algorithm, are the things going viral, and it's part of the game I don't want to play. I don't want to do trigger content. I don't want my content to spread because it's argumentative or evokes emotion in people that makes them get reactive or triggered. It's just not my vibe. I don't give a shit. And this is why I've never wanted to do the trial reels and all of these different things to go viral, because it's just not in alignment to how I want to serve or speak, and it doesn't feel good. So with that being said, my request is, if anything I ever offer, the microdoses, the men's group, this podcast, if there's anything that ever brings any bit of value to your life, I just ask that you help spread the message, that you tell other people in your life that may benefit from it, that you like, share, subscribe, post, comment, like all of those things help so much. And it lets me know what you're looking for, what you need. This is very much a community-driven project that I want to embark in on this podcast. Nothing I do, I want to be about me. It's like my prayer for Entheos is that this being, this entity, this idea that is not of me, it is through me, that it gets to become so prosperous, abundant, and wealthy, and so expansive in its mission that all of those who decide and choose that I want to serve this entity gets to do it from their most authentic expression. That's how it's been built so far. As people show up and like, hey, I'm really good at this and I want to serve the mission. It's like, great, we got a home for you. And so I don't want anything I ever do to be about me. I want it to be about everybody involved in the community, and that is no different here. And so with that being said, if you know men struggling that don't have brotherhood, if you're in a relationship with a man that's not showing up, that is still getting triggered and boyish and shuts down when you try to open up and yells and gets aggressive and is reactive and doesn't have purpose in his life, like, send him over, please. And if the microdosing has benefited you or the podcast has benefited you, yeah, again, like, share, comment, spread the message, repost. It really, really, really helps, and it's greatly appreciated. And, I've been in a process around the last 4 days since I started this 40-day devotional, and that's exactly why I went into it, to challenge and confront myself, to meet these parts of myself that is not fully devoted still. I'm so devoted, and I hear the whisper of ways I'm still not doing what I'm being instructed to do. I'm so committed, and I was sleeping in. I was too much in flow. I wasn't being structured enough. Like, there's always another level if we choose it for ourselves. There's never an end game. And I continue to see the next level of how I'm being called into service. And I just want to say thank you to everyone's likes, comments, shares, and reflections so far. I've gotten probably 12, 13 people reach out and send me a message. A few of them have brought tears to my eyes because they've just been so beautiful about the reflections of what they learn, feeling like they're integrating into my life and my world more and all these things. It means so much. So thank you for the way that everybody is showing up already. And that is my only ask of you. Today, I'm going to contemplate on what my Instagram post was yesterday about, now I'm at 306 days, about celebrating 305 days of semen retention. And I'd been wanting to speak that since like day 275. And I delayed, and I delayed, and delayed, and delayed, and delayed. I got in my mind about the stories. I started feeling like no one wants to hear about this. Why am I going to open up? This is a weird topic, blah, 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 blah. All the ways that my mind still loves to tell stories to keep me out of stuff. I posted something today about life is electric and like pray it and will be so, and it's so beautiful. And there's this little voice of like, oh, did you write that right? It's like this self-doubt thing, man. It's such a... There's so much fuckery in it, so much limitation in what the mind allows us to truly be and what we are, which is these divine beings that have so much creative potential inside of us if we choose it so. So yesterday I put it out there, and it felt good to get that out. And I had to record 3 different times because all of a sudden I'm at 5 minutes, and I'm like, dude, these freaking algorithms, man. You got to make sure it's under 3 or it won't spread and won't get shared. And it's just like, oof, this is why I started this. I am not a short-winded individual. If you've been on any of my calls or teachings or cohorts or coaching, any of it, where I shine is really allowing myself to run. When I tap into a channel, let's call it for lack of a better word, and I really let myself go. And this is why I've really enjoyed this podcast so far, which I'm just calling it a podcast, is allowing myself to give these ideas room to breathe, because I don't think that we're short form people. I think the short form world we have entered is actually robbing us of so much creative potential and attention and connection more than anything. So I want to talk about semen retention and sex and and masculine, feminine principles and relationship. And I'm sure this topic alone is I could speak for hours and hours and hours and hours on. So I'm just going to let this rip for 15, 20 minutes, where I'm already at 7 minutes. See what I mean? I would have guessed I was at like 4. I'm going to let this rip for 15, 20 minutes. And based on your feedback, I will continue to talk about this. And just a quick recap for maybe somebody that hasn't seen my first 2 videos on this. The reason I started the practice of semen retention was coming out of my last relationship, where I dated a woman who was sexually molested by her father at a very, very young age. And I had this shadow inside of me where I would sexualize and objectify women. I did it for 2 decades of my life when I was partying. My entire goal when I went out on weekends was to hook up with somebody. And it didn't matter how many times that happened, and I woke up the next morning in literal anxiety, feeling hateful towards myself, shaming myself, guilting myself, feeling no connection to this individual. I hated it every time. And yet it was the thing I sought and kept seeking, because I would tell myself the story that this next one's going to be the one. This next one's going to be different. This next one, it's going to feel different. This next one, maybe it's my wife. Because at the end of the day, I believe what all humans are seeking is belonging, connection. And it is we are the furthest from it. We're the most corrupted from it in this hookup culture that has been pedestalized and idolized. And I participated in it for a long time. I looked at women as objects of my pleasure. And somebody said this once, and it just stuck with me. And it's a brutal way of saying it, but it's so true. It's like using another human's body for masturbation. That's what hookup culture is. When we're engaging in the most sacred thing in the world, with no attachment, no intimacy, no emotionality, no foreplay, no care after. And going into that last relationship, I was still living in a lot of shame and guilt that I was still carrying. And a lot of this stemmed from when I was young. I started watching porn when I was 11. I had 2 older brothers. We were all watching. We only had one family computer, and none of us knew that the history bar existed on the internet. So one day, my mom sits us in the bedroom, and she's like, I know what you boys have been looking at the computer. And one of the first things that she had spoken, and I'm paraphrasing because it's, I have a memory of the energy of the conversation, but then not the exact words, but the paraphrase is like, you know what the church says about this, do you want to go to hell? And to receive that from the feminine, again, this has nothing to do with my mother. She was only able to speak from the perspective of everything that she knew and understood and integrated in her own stories and wounds. And so, although it came from her, at this point, we've had this conversation. And I don't put any of that. I just clicked a button on my microphone thing, so I hope that didn't mess anything up. I'm still figuring out all this tech side stuff. Yeah, we've had these conversations, so I feel fine speaking to it as bluntly as I can. But to receive that from a woman, my first ever feeling of desire, of this erotic expression within myself, of feeling turned on by a woman on a screen. I was told by a woman, shamed by a woman, in the guise of the programming of the church, that I should be shameful of that. I'm going to go to hell for it. And there's some other things that happen in that conversation I don't think are appropriate to bring up in this moment. I'm sure I'll share at some point. But it was really the initial wound of my own sexual energy, of creating that disassociation and that rupture and the shame and guilt narratives that really erupted and lived inside me for 2.5 decades to follow. And going into this relationship with that woman, those were still very alive in me. I felt a lot of shame around my sexual energy, or my sexuality. And this channel I work with, Mary Margrave, shout out Mary, she's extremely talented. She talks about how our sexuality is our spirituality, because we are all born from the energy of sexuality. What is more spiritual than that? It is literally God force coming through us that gives birth to life, literally life. And so if we have any sort of resistance and shame and guilt towards our own sexuality, we are denying God at some level. And that's where I live most of my life, is in the shame of my own sexuality. No wonder I was addicted to Viagra and Cialis from 19 to 31. I did not have sex without it. There was multiple opportunities I did have to have sex, and I would have near panic attacks because I would realize I didn't take a pill or I didn't have one on me. Imagine how bad that was in relationship. None of my partners in that time ever knew this trauma I had, my fear of impotence, all the steroids I did that were again just a reflection of this part of myself that I had to create this rupture between me and my sacred life force, my sexuality. And so bringing so much of that shame I had around it into this relationship, of course, we attracted each other to work through these wounds. And so what that really came down to, and I'm sure I'll talk about that relationship much because I appreciate her and I still have so much love for her, and I pray for her often because she was the greatest transformational catalyst I've ever experienced in my life. Like, that relationship is everything to me still. And we're not in a place where we're talking right now, and I still hold that prayer and I hold that highest timeline that we can be. And I get it. I know I showed up in ways inside of that relationship that were painful, that although I'm not responsible for her stories, I was playing the mirror of her perspective and perception within those stories. And that's the power of relationship. What we project on our partner is not their responsibility, y'all. None of it. Our triggers are not their responsibility. Our stories are not their responsibility. Our traumas are not their responsibility. And in fact, we attract the partner to specifically shine a light on all of the parts of us that are holding us free. And so although through all this work that I've done, I don't take responsibility for those stories, I can take responsibility for how I showed up within them. And I think this is where the power and potency of relationship really kicks in, where it becomes so fruitful for one another. It's like, hey, if I'm willing to own all of my experience, nothing you do is ever mine and nothing I ever do is ever yours. I take full responsibility for my judgments, my projections, and my triggers. And you take full responsibility for your judgments, projections, and triggers. And then in that safe space we create with those agreements, we decide that our truth is the pathway to freedom. We can truly be free of and have anything we want in this life through the catalyst of relationship. And it doesn't always work out that way. And so we got to re-experience mutually all of our wounding. She highlighted all of the ways that I had stories around the feminine. I highlighted all the ways that she had stories around the masculine. And they're all stories. And one of the things I realized from that, the beauty of the depth that we had gone, the shadows that, that relationship was 90% work, and it was so beautiful because bless that work, I would not be where I am without it. And we learn a lot in the shadows. And the shadow is just as important as the light. And one of the things that I had gotten to shortly after the breakup is the realization that because of that initial wound around my sexuality with the shame and the guilt narratives that were passed through my mother from however that was passed to her, because it was, and the church narrative on top of that, is because I had been separated from the most native, the most organic part of what it is to be human, this life force, sexuality. I had built in the shadow frequency of wanting power over women because that's who I believe took my power. Like, think about that. So many of the things that we project on men and women in our life, especially in relationship, it's the shadow of wanting power over them. And so that is any man who is objectifying and sexualizing women at a deep level, they're doing it because they want power over the woman. It makes them feel good to objectify. You're not human. You don't have a heart. You turned me on because you got great tits or a great ass, and I can do something with that. I can use that as leverage for my own pleasure and completely denounce you as the divine sovereign being you are. That's what the wound is. And I had to touch this part of myself where I wanted power over. And that's how that came up inside that relationship. When we'd go in public and I'd have a wandering eye or watch porn behind her back, I'd bring it to her every time. I'd admit it every time. And to her point, she was like, "Why didn't you bring it to me before?" And because the shadow frequency of not bringing it to her before, when I'm experiencing the desire, the impulse, was one that was too vulnerable and intimate for me. And there's a lot I'll go into too about a lot of reasons the men don't open up is we're afraid to be judged by y'all. Because your judgment, the judgment that is very harsh from the feminine, it is very harsh. I invite all my ladies listening to this right now to just feel into and imagine all of the ways that you judge your spouse or judge men. Because that judgment, because a woman's voice is so powerful, that judgment confirms a man's greatest fear, which is I'm not enough. And so we would rather just shut up and not say anything than actually speak the truth of what's happening because we're so afraid of receiving your judgment that's rooted in guilt and shame. As I was. And it's not an excuse for how I showed up. And it was the truth of what I experienced at the time because I wasn't able to hold myself inside of that. And so that's why I started this process and practice, is I wanted to meet that part of me. What if I took all of it off the table? No more play. No more release, no more giving away that life force freely. Because the thing about our sexual energy is it is the most potent life force in the universe. Like, think about this. Just really, life itself, consciousness itself is bred and birthed through the potency of sexual energy and everything that comes with it. One seed created me. 300 to 600 million seeds are in every single release a man gives away. Feel into that. I was created by one. Hundreds of millions of seeds are released every time a man releases. And because of that sacred energy, the potency of what that life force is, the energy, the vitality, the magnetism, the manifestation power in that life force energy, whatever I'm giving it away to, I'm literally creating more of that in my life. This is why porn is so inescapable for so many men. If I'm giving that life force away to something falsified on a screen, I'm creating the paradigm and narrative that only that thing I'm seeing that is not tangible and real is the only thing that's going to perpetuate my desire and eroticism in life. And so when I don't see that happening in my real life because I'm in denial of my desires, I'm sucked in. And this is the only place that I want to give it to. And then it becomes self-feedback loop. The more I give it to it, the more it creates. The more I give it to it, the more it creates. And we create our own hell. And so it's being so intentional about where this life force energy goes. That was the lesson I took from it. And now after 300 days, I'm like, even when I'm in partnership, and this is a deeper conversation. I've read a lot of Montauk Chia's work, the Tibetan book of sexology. It's like orgasm and ejaculation are not the same processes. And to be very vulnerable, like I've been able to experience through this process many of the O's without the E's. Because they are not the same thing. And this goes into the deeper programming I think men have been infiltrated in by how marketing and media and politics, everything is about sexualizing women, So men give our life force away to the objectification of women to create the separation between the masculine and the feminine. Because the more we are separated from each other, the more you look at me as the problem, the more I look at you as the object, we're not actually coming together to create and harness the potency that union brings. Union in friendship, union in family, union in relationship, union of the masculine and feminine. And if there's a rupture of that union outside of me, there's a rupture of that union inside of me. And so I'm losing an entire aspect of self as well. I have a feminine inside of me, just as you have a masculine inside of you, for the women listening. It's changed my relationship to a lot, to how I look at sex, to how I look at women, their bodies, the judgments I used to have. I didn't even realize. It's like when I was so caught in that, I started at such a young age, I didn't even realize that the first thing I would do is judge a woman's body. Like, that pains me. I was at this women's retreat that I held at the end of June, April. I think it was the end of April. No, Mother's Day weekend, beginning of May. I held a women's retreat. I had 13 women say yes to me holding space with my brothers in a medicine ceremony at a 4-day retreat. One of the most incredible experiences of my life. Like, I appreciate those women so much. I gained so much from that experience. It opened me up so much. It opened my heart in so many ways. I've never felt so seen by the feminine. There was just so many good things that came from that experience. I'm still integrating. And during the ceremony, towards the end of the ceremony, I ended up going into this really deep grief portal, where I was walking around the room and I ended up being called that I felt like I had this grief and tears I want to move through. And so I sat at the end of the couch in the ceremony space, and I like violently wept for 20, 30 minutes. And I shared the next day in front of them that the reason that I felt into that grief portal, the reason I found myself weeping, was I was grieving that little boy in me that was so scared of the feminine, a feeling that shame and guilt from the feminine again that I'd experienced in many relationships, including the one I'm talking about. I continued to attract that shame narrative from the feminine until I was able to heal it within myself. Because of that, I perpetuated this shadow within me that wanted power over women. And in that ceremony, I'd felt all the ways that led to hurting. I probably couldn't even tell you how many women. Because they've never spoken those words to me. Or maybe they don't even know that they were hurt because they're in their own process. And it was hard for me to admit that to them the next day. But I spoke it. And then I ended up grieving and crying in front of them as well of the ways that I have manipulated and objectified and abused. I'm sure in many ways. I've never been physical. I've definitely never crossed the line as far as if a woman said no. I see myself in that integrity. And it doesn't mean that there hasn't been situations where a woman couldn't speak that no. She didn't have the strength in her to do it. And I still showed up in ways that weren't creating safety for her. And this is the part, this is why I talk about it so openly. It's hard for me to talk about this shit. Right now, I'm feeling it in my chest. I'm like, fuck, man, who's going to listen to this? And the reason I talk about this stuff so openly is, one, to love myself at a deeper level. I'm doing the best I can. And the more I allow myself to be seen in where I am and my struggles and my past and my history and what I'm moving through now, the more opportunities I give myself to have compassion and love myself. And one thing I see myself more in more than anything is my integrity. I own that now. I never used to be able to. I know my heart. I know how I'm trying to show up in this life. I receive reflections and feedback. And if you've been in my communities, you've seen that. Everybody has a voice in my life. And it's hard to admit those things. And this is why I think, not why I think, this is why I speak to it so openly, because my prayer is that I give other men the opportunity and the courage and strength to confront this part of them. Because the fact is, fellas, most all of us, 99% of us, have been all of this, if not for that long, at some point in our lives. And this is the deep, dark thing. And I'm sure I'll do a whole podcast on pornography for the fellas out there, because I have done that is a long journey, but it's objectification at the deepest, purest level. And if we objectify anything outside of us, we're objectifying the part within us, which means we're creating separation, which means we're not actually harnessing the gifts of what it means to be in union within self and out of self. And so that's my prayer in talking about these things and posting publicly and being a bigger proponent for the protection of women. I was not most my life, and most men are not now. And there's so much beauty to be had inside of that. And so hopefully this is an opportunity for another man to recognize that truth inside of himself, to speak to that part, to join the men's group. Like, this is why men need each other. It's a non-judgmental space to speak what the fuck is going on in our lives. We're not meant to bring that heaviness to our women. You bring it to your brothers and then show up to hold space for your women. And so I feel this new part of me. The more I talk about this, the more protective I feel about the feminine as well. And that's been a really beautiful experience to witness. Because as I feel my feminine within me coming online, I feel my masculine with me wanting to protect that feminine. And so then it comes out wanting to protect the feminine outside as well. Yeah, I can feel there's 10 different ways I can even take this. And so I'd just love to hear what resonated and what didn't, what you would like me to go deeper on. But our sexual energy is sacred, and not from the way that it's spoken to us in religion. That is not what I'm talking about either. Like, I say this with as much love as I can, but all that programming is part of what's fueling so much of these issues and these shadow frequencies and the shame and the guilt narratives. Where do we think it came from in the first place? And it is all divine. There's truth in that as well. Our relationship to this aspect of ourselves, men and women alike, I believe is the core foundation to our relationship with everything in life. Because if we don't have the sacredness in relationship to this part of ourselves, how can we to anything else? At the depth that God and life are asking of us, at least. And I know the test for me is going to be when I do get into relationship. And I pray for that soon. I have this prayer of remembering that I read that just describes so beautifully the frequency of this next woman and our relationship and our life together. And I can't wait for it. And I trust in timing. And one of my requests is going to be like, hey, this practice is very important to me. And I don't want it to just stop because we're in relationship now. Like, this is what I've really taken away. And one last note, because we're coming up on 30 minutes. And this is for the bros out there. I believe that the two things men seek in this life are freedom and purpose. And it's not freedom in the way that a boy would describe it. Freedom in relationship. Fuck who I want. Let's go poly. No. That ain't it. It's freedom of the self. Freedom of our own self-judgment, of our own criticism. Freedom to get out of our own way, to be devoted and dedicated and committed to what our purpose is in this life, which is to be of service, to be protectors, providers, to create safety for all beings on this planet. Most importantly, our women. And for any man out there that doesn't feel fulfilled in any way, this practice will help you get there. That isn't building something of purpose, this practice will help you get there. That doesn't have the relationship. I'll go on and on and on and on and on. Because if we as men do not have mastery over the most potent life force that we are capable of giving, feeling, etc., how can you have mastery over anything else in life? That's really what it comes down to. If I don't have mastery over my impulses, if I don't have mastery over the ability to create safety inside of these containers, to honor someone's no, to be attuned to the feminine past my own desire that typically overrides and interrupts an ability for a man to be attuned to the needs of the feminine in every moment. if I don't have mastery of those minute aspects and energies and frequencies of what this life is showing and giving us, how can I have mastery over anything else? And just from again, no one should or needs to do anything. I'm just only ever going to speak from my own perspective of life. And what my life has blossomed in the last 9 months in starting this practice speaks for itself. I'm happy to list out all of those aspects of what has happened, but there's a reason why. And I believe the reason why is this practice. And it's deeper, so much deeper. I can imagine I'll talk on this many times. All right. We're at 30 minutes, y'all. Appreciate you. Thank you for your reflections. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your love. I'm just so grateful to live this life. I'm so grateful to be alive. I'm so grateful to be on the path I am, to serve in the way I am, and none of that is possible without y'all. I love you so much. Praying a blessed day, week, month, year into your life. May we all be joyful, peaceful, and abundant.